So, so this is my life as a legislator. I try and work, and I have all the distractions of home coming in. So it makes things very, very interesting. We were sworn in on January 6th, as you know, on Zoom. And later that day, we had the events in Washington, D.C., which caused a little bit of excitement all around our country. And then on January 7th, the legislature responded, passing our first resolution condemning the actions of D.C. and saying that Trump should be held responsible. And since that time, I've been working on many, many other things. So my days are really full. I'm doing an awful lot of learning right now. I've been assigned to the Corrections and Institutions Committee. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is related to those two areas, which are connected, but definitely very separate. But in addition to that, I'm also doing a lot of learning just through each of the sessions that I attend every day. There are sessions both on the floor and smaller caucuses that I attend to learn more about what's going on in our state and in our region. So I'll just highlight a couple of those. Sarah's going to talk with us a little bit later about the Climate Solutions Caucus, which is one of the caucuses that I attend. I also go to the meetings of the Social Equity Caucus, the Women's Caucus, the Rural Economic Development Caucus, and the Workers Caucus. And in the Workers Caucus, I also serve on a subcommittee, which is for education and workforce development. So all of those are really important learning opportunities for me, where I'm gathering together with other people other legislators and community members who are interested in those issues to learn about pending concerns or pending needs, and also talk about what might be some strategies we could take to address those. It's a huge learning curve. I'm only 2 weeks in, and there's an awful lot that I don't know yet. But I would say that I'm filled with a lot more hope now than I was 2 weeks ago when I first took office. There have been some changes since the administration changed in DC that give me reason to be very hopeful. The first day Biden came into office, he issued 17 executive orders relating to all kinds of different issues, from rejoining the Paris Accord, banning drilling in the Arctic, getting rid of the Muslim ban, and doing some immigration reforms. I mean, a lot of really, really important things happened on that very first day that to me sent a message of hope that we're going to try and move back in a direction that I'm going to feel good to be a part of. So I'm really the very new kid on the block, and there's an awful lot that I don't know yet, but I'm learning more and more every day, and I'm really enjoying the process of becoming familiar with the ways that we can help to make our state better through working together. So that's probably enough for now, and I'll look forward to talking to you individually later in the hour. Mike, are you going to go next?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. I'm State Representative
Mike, did you want to add anything, or should we go to Sarah?
Yeah, can you hear me? Sure. I'd like to give my introduction now as well, my opening comments. So thanks, everybody, for coming out today. I'm State Representative Mike Murwicki. I live in Putney, and Michelle and I both serve the Windham 4 district of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. I'd like to start, as Eva suggested earlier. I'm not going to read the whole poem, but I'd like to read Amanda Gorman's beginning to her poem, The Hill We Climb. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. What a wonderful way to start this new administration, the next 4 years, and a time that I think of great hope and challenge, and that once we get past the pandemic of COVID, we have the opportunities to address the other pandemics of climate and racial and social justice. And we're ready to do that. It does feel hopeful for me, having an administration in Washington that we can work together with. And I think the ceremony really helped move us into this next part of where we're going in the next 4 years. It was also helpful for me to see Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama come together and hear the celebrations, from the singings of Lady Gaga to Jennifer Lopez, and then that poem by Amanda. Then President Biden's entreaty for America to unite and come together to face the challenges of today. And that we can do this. We can do it in lots of ways, and that he has a faith that enough of us can come together to bring all of us forward. One reminder of seeing people at the Capitol is our Capitol here in Montpelier, and a place that I miss, because being in the State House, I'm always aware of the history of the place, and that we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, and we are walking through the doors that were opened for others before us. So in that way, we get to work. And I was appointed again to the House Government Operations Committee, and Representative Copeland Hanzas is the chair of that committee. And last session, we did some pretty important work, not just getting ready for this election, but undertaking the work of police reform, looking at systemic racism. And we're going to be picking up on those bills again. We've already started to look at the last election, how it went. Record turnout in Vermont and across the country. And overall, it went pretty well. We did sent everybody a ballot. There was some concerns about how that worked in the primary, because we had to send three ballots out to everybody. And the challenge moving forward is figuring out what's the best way to ensure we continue to have high turnout like that, and make sure they're free, fair elections that maintain the health and safety of Vermonters. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. COVID is certainly the first priority, keeping people healthy. And one of the important things is to remember, as the economists who briefed us before the session, is the health of the economy is predicated on the health of Vermonters. And the same is true across the country. That's why I'm impressed that President Biden has made this his priority, because the economy is not going to get better unless our people are healthy. That's a big thing. And then we can move along to help with the economy. And one of the things that our new speaker, Jill Krawinski, has been saying all along is no one left behind in this economy. She wants to make sure everyone in Vermont and all 14 counties is served ably well. So that's something I totally agree with, that we need to make sure no one is left behind. We want an economy that works for all as we move forward into the 21st century. I'm going to stop there. And we will have time for questions after Representative Copeland Hanzas. But at this time, I wanted to introduce her. Representative Sarah Copeland Hanzas is the chair of the House Government Operations Committee, but she's also the co-chair of the Joint Legislative Climate Solutions Caucus. And I have to say that when she and Senator Pearson took over, the caucus became that much more effective. Her leadership, their organizational skills, not only helped us pass the climate solutions bill last year, but after the governor vetoed it, we were able to override that veto. And just for some perspective on that, I think there have only been 10 successful veto overrides in the history of Vermont.
Wow.
So it's not an easy thing to do. So without any more ado, please help me and welcome Representative Sarah Copeland Hanzas.
Thank you for the warm welcome and the great introduction. Michelle and Mike, I really appreciate you inviting me to Zoom down to your neck of the woods to talk about climate action in Vermont. If my internet connection is unstable, I will go off video. So if for some reason my words are starting to garble, just give me a signal and I will go off video so you can hear what I'm saying. So I'm West Fairleigh, so I'm just an hour and a half straight north on the interstate. And I get down to your neck of the woods quite often, visiting family in Brattleboro, and not so much this time of year and not so much during the pandemic. So I know that we're all looking forward to being able to resume face-to-face human contact. To you about the Climate Solutions Caucus and about the work that we've been doing. We're very proud of what we were able to accomplish last year in the passage of the Global Warming Solutions Act. And I have to say, first and foremost, we wouldn't have been able to do that work without your help. All of us hear from our constituents when it came to that moment where we needed to decide whether to override the governor to give us the backing and the strength and the courage to push forward even with the governor's objections. I'm going to just go off video for a moment and see if that helps a little bit more because I think I was a little garbled. So you get to look at my picture. That's me in Bradford. Come to Bradford. It's a nice little town. At any rate, the Solutions Caucus really relied on a lot of contact with our constituents in order to do what we were able to do in the last biennium. And as you can expect, this time during this pandemic and social distancing is a little more difficult to stay as connected to Vermonters as we'd like to be. But we are just as committed to doing that this year in the remote meeting format as we were last year, because we understand that the power of the voice of the people is really what's going to help us design the solutions that we need for the future. A year ago at this time, we had just finished a roadshow tour where we went to town halls all over the state, met face to face with, between 30 and 100 people in meetings all over the state of Vermont, told folks what we were trying to accomplish and asked them to help us work on that, help us call on our colleagues to ask, bold climate legislation. And, this year we really haven't been able to do that. Our legislative session last year was well extended as we needed to spend the time to figure out how COVID relief money needed to be distributed around the state. And then we jumped into campaign season and it seems like just a blink and we were back in session, albeit Zooming from our homes. And so we didn't have the time to go on that roadshow this year to really talk about our ideas for climate action, but I'm here to give you a little bit of an update on what we are hoping to focus on this year. And the focus really is in finding ways to help Vermonters save money on their heating and transportation by accelerating the transition away from fossil fuels. And the ideas that we're moving forward with this year are not just grabbed out of thin air. They're really coming from some great ideas that we have heard developed by really smart Vermonters. And so we really only have three bill priorities this year, But we have some priorities of what we're focusing on conceptually, and I want to start with those. We are focusing on making sure that all of our transitions are fair and equitable to everyone in Vermont. And so that means, you know, people who are living in downtowns, people who are living out in the country. That means our Vermonters of Native descent. That means our new Vermonters, our new Americans. That means making sure that our transitions are inviting input and inviting scrutiny from Vermonters all over the state, new Vermonters and old Vermonters. And I think that is going to be the hardest focus for us, just because it means that we have to check ourselves and ask if our solutions are accessible to all. But I think it's going to be the most important focus for us in a just transition, to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind and that we are prioritizing people who have been harmed the most by our reliance on fossil fuels. The other area of focus for us, and Michelle and Mike talked about this a little bit when they gave their opening remarks, is we need to focus on taking advantage of what's coming down from our new federal administration. It's really exciting that we have a president who believes in science and who believes in rejoining the rest of the world in making a commitment to changing what we're doing and to saving our climate and our environment. And so we want to stay in really close contact with our senators. Sanders and Leahy are both in very advantageous positions in terms of their influence on the budget and appropriations at the federal level. And we want to make sure that we look for ways to get a double win out of the stimulus money that will come out of this federal administration. And by double win, I mean, how can we save Vermonters money and make their lives better? And how can we use that in a way that accelerates our transition away from fossil fuels? The third area of focus for us this year that is not really a bill, but really something important, and this is something that I would welcome you to join in on as well, and that is staying in touch with the Climate Council that was created out of the Global Warming Solutions Act. This council is going to be so important for us as they work over the next year to develop a plan for how Vermont meets its Paris climate goals. The council is housed in the Agency of Administration, and I'm going to put a link to the council's webpage in the chat right now. You can open up the chat and download it, or if you can't do that at the same time as watching this, you can do a Google search later for Vermont Climate Council Agency of Administration. They have a lot of their past meetings. All of their past meetings are recorded there for you to watch, and you can also see how to contact members of the council. It's important for us in the Climate Solutions Caucus in the legislature to keep in constant contact with the council and the work that they're doing. Not only because we are going to need to react to the plan that they present, but also because I think it's going to be important for us to show the public members of the council that we believe in what they're doing. Right now, the Agency of Administration under the Scott administration is running the Climate Council. They're essentially setting the agendas and deciding who speaks. But we envision this council to be a combination of Vermonters representing different sectors, different areas of the state, different interests, working alongside those agency secretaries and department heads. We didn't envision it to be run solely by administration folks. We really envisioned it to be a partnership. And so we want to stay in contact with all of those House and Senate appointed members to make sure that they have what they need to do the good work of writing the plan. So I welcome you to follow the council if you are so inclined. And now I want to just switch gears and talk briefly about 3 bills that we are going to be focused on trying to move this year. The The legislation is narrow in focus. I think it's very firmly grounded in that double win of climate action and saving Vermonters money. And so the very first program that we're going to be focused on is going to be coming out of the Senate. Senator Bray has been working on this concept for a while, and it's we're calling it weatherization for all. We know that weatherization is the best way to save Vermont families and Vermont businesses money as they make their buildings more efficient. But we have not yet been able to crack the nut of how to provide weatherization for all. And so I'm putting another link in the chat box, and it's a link to the Energy Action Network 2020 Summit. This weatherization for all was a pitch at this summit. And the pitch was, how do we move weatherization from being, just a patchwork here and there into something that is accessible to everyone. So whether you are renting or whether you own, whether you are low income, middle income, or very wealthy, how can we help make sure that more Vermont homes are being weatherized? That creates jobs in Vermont. That creates revenue to the state as those workers in Vermont, have the money that they need to be able to buy what they need. It's a win-win in that it makes your home more efficient and cheaper to own, but it also creates that added economic benefit of jobs and more money floating around in the economy. So if you can go on to the Energy Action Network, you can look at the different pitches and you can see a little bit more about what this weatherization for all idea is proposing. Another bill that's originating on the House side is Transportation Act. And this is really basically just saying, instead of presenting our transportation budget as solely about roads and bridges and paving miles, let's reconstruct or reformat our transportation budget so that we're looking at what in our transportation budget is helping us meet our climate goals. What are we doing for park and rides so that more people can commute? What are we doing for bike lanes and pedestrian continuity so that people can walk and bike around their villages and towns? What are we doing for EV infrastructure so that it can be as easy for someone driving an electric vehicle to travel from Burlington to Brattleboro and back? Just as easy as you can, with a gas-powered vehicle where there's a gas station on every corner. So the Transportation Modernization Act really just reformats the transportation budget so that we can see what we're investing in and so that we can see where we might want to put future stimulus revenue into helping accelerate people's access to non-fossil fuel transportation alternatives. The third bill that Mike and I are going to have some fun with, I believe, because it's going to come to our committee, is a bill that was on the path to passage last year, but when COVID hit and the committees needed to stop their normal workload and focus in on COVID recovery, this bill went by the wayside. But this bill is about contractors. These are carpenters and builders from around the state, simply registering with the Secretary of State's office, the Office of Professional Regulation. It's a very light touch. It doesn't require any particular, education attainment or certificate, but it is a point of contact so that everyone who's building and helping us renovate or build new homes around the state has access to educational information that will help our homes be more efficient from the get-go. If you are building a home and you're looking at a bid between two contractors, you might want to be able to look into some sort of a crystal ball and be able to predict which of those two bids is going to give you a more efficient home. And ultimately, that's what we're going for. But we can't do that unless we know who's out there building these homes and unless we provide them with the most current information about how to build efficiently. And so contractor registry is going to be a very light touch, but it's going to be something that we will be able to build on in future years to help folks, help consumers around the state of Vermont have a little bit more knowledge about the type of contractors that we have out there. So that's going to be something that we hope to move through our committee. There will be other bills that will come up that we as a Climate Solutions Caucus will say, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. No brainer. We should definitely do it. But this is what we're looking at just as at a first blush. These are the narrow areas of focus that we thought we could attain while we're in this remote meeting environment. And so as I started talking about how we couldn't do this without you, I want to finish with that as well. It is very important for legislators to hear from their constituents and to be able to say to their colleagues, this is something that my constituents care about. And so we hope that you'll stay in touch with what we're doing in the Climate Caucus. Senator Pearson and I do a video log each week with an update on what's going on in the legislature, and we will also be giving regular updates on what the Climate Council is doing. So if you can visit our website, vtclimatecaucus.org, we would love to have you follow along, and every week we'll give a call to action for how you can step up and give positive push and positive support for bold climate action in Vermont. So I feel like I've been talking forever. So I'm going to stop talking and try turning on my video again. In the event that folks have questions, I would be happy to take them.
Sure. We're going to, before we do questions right now, Keith Marks is here from Next Stage in Putney, and I think he's still here. Keith has an announcement for a program I think people would like to hear about. So Keith, are you out there?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Putting me on the spot.
Oh,
hey, buddy.
Sorry about that.
You mean you're talking about the Know Your New Neighbor?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. So we have been watching sort of the news, and there was an article, I think, in the New York Times that actually named Vermont as certain communities not welcoming new transplants to the area. And so Next Stage decided to jump in, and we're going to launch a series called Know Your New Neighbors. And we'll start that this Thursday. We're going to highlight Mike and Kim Costco, who moved up here to run the general store in Putney, and also a family that moved here from New York. He works for Google, and they have two young kids, one at the Central School and one at the grammar school. And so our goal is to run this at least once a month. If it turns out to be very exciting for people and they want more, we're happy to do more. But after talking to a few of these families, we realized that there were not many opportunities for them to get connected to the established community. And so while we need to remain socially distant, I figured we could use technology to introduce these new community members. So thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you. So if people have questions, there's two ways you can do that. You can put it in the chat, or if you want to use your function to raise your hand, I can call on you. Now, Jody, I see you and I don't see your hand up, and I'm very surprised. Can you unmute yourself?
I just did unmute myself. As you know, this isn't my top priority in the legislature, but it is one of the top ones, but I'm more interested in some of the others. So I'll be quiet.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, though, too. And we know your dedication to education, and we'll stay tuned on what's happening locally and on the state level there. Any other? Let's see. Caitlin.
Hello. Can you hear me? No, I can't hear you now. Mike, you're muted. Oh, all right. Okay, this is a question to all three of you, I guess. First of all, Sarah, I like what you said about the bills that you're planning to do, and all your focuses on fair and equitable. I think that is all excellent. And I must say, I'm from the Living Earth Action Group down in Westminster West. And we have been working on ways to enhance the vitality and life of our living planet for 4 years this month, all kinds of areas. And one thing that has become really clear to us we've studied drawdown, and we're part of the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, is that photosynthesis is by far the best way to draw down carbon. Photosynthesis, trees do it, all plants do it. They draw carbon dioxide out of the air and put it in the ground and into leaves. And so really have to keep that in mind. And I'm concerned about habitat destruction because, if we stop using fossil fuels and continue to destroy our habitat, including our soils and our forests, okay, we're not going to be in any better shape. We're going to be in really horrible shape, worse shape. And part of the habitat destruction is by putting poisons into our atmosphere, which going into the air and into the water. And I'm talking about pesticides, not only agricultural, but mostly agricultural pesticides, and called Roundup is the most favorite one, but there's a bunch of other ones. And it's with this new way to, what is it? It's called no-till farming, which sounds like a really great thing because it's true. It doesn't, because tilling destroys the soil, which is a habitat and a really significant habitat. So no-till sounds like a good thing, except the way that what they do after they've not tilled is they spray Roundup in order to kill down the plants that have grown. So the industrial ag companies love that because it makes it makes for more sales of glyphosate. And we're putting billions of, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's just an astonishing number of pounds of toxins that we are spraying onto our crops and then eating them. We eat these things. And not only that, it's worse than that because it rains and the 90% of the glyphosate washes into the watershed.
Yeah.
So
Caitlin,
yeah,
if I could address that a little bit,
yeah,
and I can only speak locally, but I know a number of, and these are primarily dairy farmers who are growing cow corn that are using low till and no till, and they're not using Roundup for the main reason it's too expensive.
Ah.
But what they're seeing, and if you'll notice, when the snow melts, most of the cornfields around here will have a green cover on it because it's a required agricultural practice now that once they cut their corn, they've got to cut it early enough so they can get a cover crop on. So you'll notice when the snow melts that most of the fields here do have that. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I know in Vermont we have passed what's called the required agricultural practices, which encourage soil revitalization and low till and no till. And to that end, even the way they plant the corn seeds is they have these machines that drill the seed right into the ground. And locally, the Agency of Ag has bought one of those machines that farmers can share. So nationally, I think what you're saying is right about the chemicals, but I think fertilizers and pesticides are not being used as much locally, only because it's too expensive and the cost of producing milk is not matching up the cost that they're getting to produce milk. So in a way, economics is driving this right now. So we have some other questions.
Okay. I know, I'm
And-
not sure that's true, but there was an article in the Vermont Digger recently. that
Like I said,
showed-
I can only speak to the farms locally around here. And
yeah.
I don't know if you're talking to the farmers here, I suggest that you do, if you haven't already.
I will.
In Westminster, the largest dairy farm in the county is Westminster Farms with the Goodells. So you might want to give them a chat and see what's going on there.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ken Blum. Welcome, Ken.
Hi. Thank you so much for having this, and thank you for taking my question. This is maybe a bit tangential to the climate issues, but I've noticed that other towns are starting to get wired for high-speed internet. I live in Putney at the end of a private road. I have consolidated, and I'm really struggling with my internet to work from home during the pandemic. Thankfully, the Putney Library has a hotspot. I end up having to drive there like 4 or 5 times a week to sit in the parking lot and do work. And I guess I have a 2-part question. The first is, what are the prospects for high-speed internet in Putney? And the second is, Xfinity gave me a bid to wire my road for $32,000. Is there somebody in state government that I can reach out to try to inquire about a grant? Thanks so much.
Yeah, sure. One of the good things about the Biden administration is they are recognizing how essential broadband is, especially in rural areas. And our hopes are that we're going to get substantial help from them. It's estimated that to go to every address in Vermont right now, it's a $300 million problem. Last year, we put $15 million towards it out of state money because the budget is scraped and tight for everything else we're looking at. In regards to Putney itself, there's a process that's going on. We're trying to get a commitment and an estimate from Consolidated, but the main part of it we want to get is that they commit to every address to the last mile. And what's happening, they're doing some expansion in Brattleboro. They plan to do some other, but they're not committing to go to the last mile. And to that end, that's why we have a county-wide project going. It's going to be a municipal utility. It's called Deerfield Valley Fiber, DV Fiber. They have started meeting, they're planning. They're under the aegis right now of the Windham Regional Planning Commission. And I'd be glad to tell you more offline. But the big hope is that the plans we have now can help both some of the private companies and this CUD get money from the feds to enhance and accelerate that build out.
And I
Sarah, did you want to?
Yeah, I would love to jump in on that for a moment, because the communications union districts, the CUDs, were enabled and created out of our House Energy and Technology Committee 2 years ago. And the Energy and Technology Committee is back on the topic of CUDs this year in order to try to create a framework for how a community or a county, a region of the state might need some special mechanism to raise money, either through grants or through some other funding mechanism that they design locally, in order to build out the fiber in their area. And so the CUD funding issue is one that's going to be focused on in our Energy and Technology Committee this year. And we can very much hope that that some of the federal stimulus dollars that are coming out into the states to help us rebuild after this pandemic shutdown will be targeted at broadband. I didn't mention it in my presentation about climate, but supporting investment in broadband is absolutely a priority of the Climate Solutions Caucus, not only because this is what we have to have in order to work and go to school from wherever we live in Vermont, but also because many of the smart grid technologies that are going to help us in the future to transition away from fossil fuels and to use electricity for our transportation and heating require a high-speed internet connection. You know, your power wall that stores your solar electricity needs to be able to be connected to the grid so that when you're not using it, the grid can use it to even out our power usage around the state. And so broadband is definitely a priority of ours, and we are eagerly awaiting the work of the Energy and Technology Committee, and we'd like to support it.
So is there anybody that you would know of in state government that might be willing to help out with grants to, like I was saying, with this Xfinity situation here? Is there a name that I could contact?
Well, Clay Purvis is the person in charge of the administration, but because of the limited funds, the grants they were giving out last year were only $3,000. So the idea that a $30,000 grant, I don't know how many people that would entail.
5.
I know when we did expansion on Putney Mountain, I think there were 70 people. So, but if we can get money from the federal government, that will accelerate this process. The challenge, as I said, though, is we can't force the private companies to build out to the last mile. The state governments do not have the authority to force these interstate companies. So that's one of the challenges and why we've moved to that solution of trying to build out the CUD countywide.
Okay, thank you.
Jim Matto.
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to jump back to your reference to Westminster Farms and the management. They're our immediate next door neighbor for going on 40 years now. We're the newcomers, not them. And they are a good one to talk to because we've seen in that 35 to 40 years, improvements in farming techniques and the impacts on climate and energy. The green cover every year, every place, methane capture and generation of a lot of electricity, quite a lot actually. Capturing the methane at the same time. They've increased the herd and significantly improved the waste manure management at the same time that the herd was increased. So there's a lot that can be done on these farms. Now they expanded from, I think, 1,200 head to almost 2,000. And to do that, they acquired farmland in Putney where they can separate the animals and do more manure control and, proper management. So anyway, I'll shut up about it, but good one to talk to. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, and I would feel free to reach out to them. The Basins are another large farm. And the other trend that's happening, because the price of milk does not meet the cost of production, more and more dairy farmers are joining most of our vegetable farmers here and going organic because they get a better price for it. I don't see any. Oh, let's see. Sam
has
Farwell.
a question in the chat, Mike.
Okay. You want to read that, Michelle?
Sure. Representative Welch is on Energy in the U.S. Congress. I'm not sure if that's the typo, but has identified broadband as an issue to reach out across the aisle. It seems especially important now to find common concerns across the political divide. Other issues that we can address to build nonpartisan coalitions. And I just want to speak to Sheila's question a little bit. It's absolutely true that broadband is an issue that I have heard people from all three parties talk about as a priority. And I mentioned at the beginning of our session today that I'm on 5 caucuses. Well, 4 of those are almost entirely Democrats and progressives. The one caucus that I'm a part of that has all 3 parties involved is the Rural Development Caucus. And I believe our very first, if not our first, our second session was dealing with the issue of rural broadband. And they did a very thorough presentation talking about the CUDs and all the different possibilities that we could use to work together to try and get broadband in our state. But Sheila's question is, what else can we do besides that? And I would say what I've seen in the legislature is that it really does look like there is a willingness in Vermont to work together right now. I mean, the second day we were in office, we passed a resolution by a vote of 130 to 16, responding to the events that happened in Washington, D.C. And that was Republicans and progressives and Democrats. Going back on a more local level, I think COVID recovery is the key thing that is on everybody's mind right now. We also passed a resolution in the House recently related to unemployment benefits related to COVID. So things that are related to COVID and what we can do to help people in Vermont get back on their feet, get the health care they need, work effectively with each other, keep their businesses running, all of those issues, those are not partisan issues, those are Vermont issues. And I've been really impressed with our ability to talk about those in a constructive way. I don't know, Mike or Sarah, do you have anything else to add?
I would just jump in and say that it gives me great hope that we have an administration in Washington, D.C. that is embracing science. I think one of the most difficult parts of finding coalitions across party lines in the last 4 years has been the repeated denial of either COVID science or climate science on the part of the federal Republican voice out of Washington, D.C. So far, our governor, who's a Republican, has very much followed the science with respect to COVID. And we can appreciate that, and we can attribute that focus to why Vermont has fared better than many other states in terms of the COVID outbreak. But we need this governor to also follow science with respect to climate action. And what's really interesting is the influence of certain industries on lawmakers, because there tends to be a stronger connection between that fossil fuel industry and the Republican lawmakers. And when you listen to Matt Cota of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association addressing the Climate Council, he says things like, I'm here representing the industry that provides X number of jobs and we deliver fuel to your home. We're the industry that you're trying to put out of business. And you know what? We've got to get beyond that kind of thinking. Yes, ultimately, we need the fossil fuel industry to be significantly diminished. And if they can't embrace that, and if they're going to continue to fund politicians with the purpose of trying to skew them away from climate action in order to maintain their industry, then it's going to be really hard to make nonpartisan coalitions. But I think that weatherization is a place that we can get nonpartisan buy-in. Everybody wants their homes to be more comfortable. Everybody wants retirees on a fixed income to be able to afford their heating and cooling bills so that they're not dying of heat stroke in the summertime, because we have more and more spans of time that get over 90 degrees in Vermont. And so that we're not having people shivering or having to choose between whether to buy their medication or to put some fuel in their heating tanks. So I'm hopeful that that weatherization is an area of nonpartisan coalition building.
Thanks, Sarah. So Sam Farwell, you had a question?
Hi, yes, and thank you for having this meeting and giving us your time, and especially Representative Hanzas for listening. I know you have your own constituents to listen to as well. So thanks for this extra time. I have a question about, the climate work in the legislature. I just read a couple things. I just read an article yesterday about a Green New Deal bill that was submitted, I think, by Anthony Polina. The article seemed to think that this bill was going nowhere because priorities were not on climate change this year. And I just would like to hear your take on that, either that bill in particular, or it seems like what you've said so far is not that. You certainly have priorities for this year. So I'd like to hear your take on that. Also, regarding the oil industry, the company that I buy oil from, unfortunately, they're based in Massachusetts, but they have massively diversified and are selling pellets. They've been selling pellets for years, and they sell heat pumps. So to me, any business that is thinking at all would be thinking about the future. And industries change. You know, what used to be U.S. Steel became USX and got almost entirely out of steel. It's what happens in business. And so I agree with you, and I support your work in spite of that kind of pushback. I hope that, there's a respectful response to that kind of pushback that can help them see the light. That I have other questions about other topics, but I guess I'll stop with that.
Sure. And Sam, what I would say is, you can put them in the chat, and you can always email us.
Yeah.
And we're glad to follow up. But Sarah, do you want to talk about Senator Polina's bill? And
Absolutely. There's almost nothing in terms of the component parts of the Green New Deal that I and most other members of the Climate Solutions Caucus wouldn't agree with. I think where we come to a sticking point is whether putting them all into one package and moving that through the legislature is a realistic way to do it. And I'll come back to sort of the most fundamental challenge, which is that we are a citizen legislature, and we're not experts in enough fields that we would be able to tackle every aspect of how you truly evolve our economy away from its traditional reliance on fossil fuels and into the economy of the future. And so instead, I think what we are more focused on as a realistic way of achieving these goals is to have to work on these component pieces in bite-sized chunks that a legislature who comes in January and leaves in May is able to do in small increments. So we absolutely believe that that our economy relies on our workers, and that our workers need to be paid a fair and livable wage. And so we fundamentally want to continue to push forward with that, given the limitation that this governor doesn't seem to agree that a $15 minimum wage is where he wants to go. And so we've had to make some compromises there in order to be able to advance that very fundamental part of a new economy. But we will continue to work on many of those components. We'll continue to push forward, but I don't see there being enough. There's just not enough time in that 5-month legislative session to tackle all things at once.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. So Paul, did you have your hand up?
I did, Mike, thank you, because I really didn't know how to put the hand from the computer on, so I appreciate you seeing me. I've been reading a little bit about some discussion is going on regarding having sales tax being applied to all services and food and clothing, which is exempt, part of which is exempt currently. And living on a border community, I'm concerned about what the ramifications of that are, and also how you respond to the fact that if it's a universal sales tax, even though the rate's lowered, it's still going to impact lower income families. So I don't know if that has any traction in the legislature or not, but I would like to hear your take on it. Thank you.
Mike, do you want to jump in on that, or you want me to give it a whirl?
Well, I'll start it if you want to jump in, but I think what Paul's referring to is a proposal or an idea I don't think there's any bill in this regard right now. And I think there was a study which has been suggested on various ways to fund state government, especially education. And the idea is to move education funding entirely to an income tax. I think the supposition there is that income is a better calculator of wealth than owning property or your house. And I think that's an argument that's been going on for quite a long time. And I think somewhere else in there was a suggestion to broaden the sales tax to services, and in that way it would reduce the percentage down to about 3%. Is that what you were talking about, Paul? Anyway,
Yes, it was, Mike. Thank you.
Sure. I can't say whether that has traction or not. I think it's an idea that's been put out there. What I can say is we'll find out if there's traction when we get past the idea of dealing with COVID and the next batch of federal money. That's going to be our priority. You know, we're going to be looking at climate actions. We're going to be looking at actions to address systemic racism. But the first priority is the health of Vermonters and COVID and the health of the economy. So it's going to be a big push. There's going to be a bunch of money coming from the feds again. So I don't think that's a priority right now, what you're referring to. It's something that might be off in the distance. But again, the priorities right now are dealing with COVID. And Sarah and Michelle, if you have anything else to add to that, please do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing that I would add is just a recognition that there are always, people spending time sort of reimagining how we raise revenue, and this idea of broadening the base so that we can lower the rate is one that's been tossed around for quite some time. And I live on a border town as well. And so I recognize very clearly the challenges of, business people saying, I'm going to have to move my business. If you start taxing my service, I'm going to have to move my service across the river so that I can be competitive. And, I think Mike's really right that we're more likely going to leave that in the conceptual conversation phase and focus on the very real challenges of beating this pandemic, getting our kids back safely into full-time in-person learning, and using our COVID relief dollars in ways that help all Vermonters.
Paul, I would also add to that on the other side of the state, it's a very different situation where New Yorkers come to Vermont for the lower taxes. Jody, you had your hand up?
Yes, I do, Mike. And I said I wasn't going to say anything, but people are talking about other issues. The big issue for a lot of us down here now is what's going to happen in State House as far as the merged boards wanting to divorce. The AOE and the State Board of Education are pushing very hard. I've watched them at the state, at the legislative education committees. They're trying to change the law that was made, I think, in the 1950s, the way that we could get out of these unions. Right now, Westminster voted to get out, and the Halifax and Reedsboro, but also on everybody's agenda now, all Guilford, Dummerston, Putney, and Brattleboro are two warning items coming up. The first one is voting to get out of this super board, which is really not working hard. You got 10 members on a board, and you've got 9 members. I don't know how many there are, but they're running 10 different schools, and it's not working. Their meetings are impossible. They're not community friendly. And so the second article is if we voted to get out, the other towns have to vote to let us get out. Well, these people in the AOE and the State Board of Education are looking to change that law so that there's no way we can get out. And if you remember correctly, we voted back in, well, I don't know, 17 or whatever, overwhelmingly everybody in a huge turnout vote not to merge, and we were forced to merge. So I want you as legislators to realize that this is coming. I want the people in the towns to realize that this is coming. And it's going to be just a month from now, basically, at town meeting that you're going to vote on this. So there's not a lot of time to get the word out. So I guess I'm putting the word out. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. You know, we're all, those of us who oppose those forced mergers are watching what happens with Westminster right now, because the next step is the other towns have to vote to agree with that. One of the things that I had pushed for, and a lot of us did, was what was in the original bill, which would allow for exit ramps. Again, right now, I know that there are some headlines which suggest that AOE wants to do a number of things, but I'm not so sure the legislature's ready to pick that up. There's some other things that they're looking at, and going back to just about every committee having something to do with COVID. And we'll certainly be watching that, but I agree with you. We don't want to see more forced mergers, and we don't want those exit ramps to be shut down before we even get to use them. So we'll certainly be watching that. Jim. Jim, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, now I've unmuted myself. A comment and a question. The comment is that it troubles me a bit that Westminster was the only town. Most towns sort of fought it and opposed it, and at the end threw their hands in the air and joined. And the law says if you've joined a municipal union, you can exit a municipal union, just the way Jody described it. The state agency seems to be taking the opinion that because Westminster was extremely stubborn and was forced in, that law that allows you to leave a voluntary union will not let you leave when you are forced in against your will. And I mean, this is how the French Revolution began. I mean, come on, this is nuts. The other question I have, though, is that the legislature, from what I see in the general news, is so quiet about it that, and I'm sure they're not really quiet up there about this issue, but it appears that way. And that makes me wonder, well, it must surely be working just gangbusters every place else because no one's complaining. And I find that hard to believe. So I'd like to know from you guys, what's it look like around the state and what are the legislators saying, and who the heck is really in favor of this besides the agency people that have a new fiefdom?
Well, I would briefly say that it's not a hot topic. In fact, it's a hot topic a little bit around here, but statewide, it's not a hot topic. And I think there's a lot of people who felt like we've dealt with this a lot. We've got other things to deal with. So whether the administration tries to push it and whether the legislature picks it up is another question. I know Sarah in her district went through this too, and I don't know where things are with your town, Sarah.
So we had a tumultuous time. There was a great resistance to merger in my neck of the woods. In fact, we went down to the wire and ended up being put through a forced merger between the towns of Bradford and Newbury. And the town of Newbury voted just earlier this year or late in 2020, voted to try to, they held a vote to see if they could get traction for actually dissolving the merger. So in my neck of the woods, it's been tumultuous on the part of a segment of the citizenry, and but the vote in Newbury did not pass with a majority. It actually has been pretty successful in terms of the schools being able to share resources where they couldn't do so easily when they were in separate districts. There's an ability to share, particularly in terms of specialized services, behavioral support services and special ed services. And so the experience of the students, I think, has probably been improved, and it's taking a while for certain parts of the community on the adult end to get used to the idea. I don't think that there is much appetite for doing anything that is disruptive to our school systems right now. Simply because our teachers and our administrators are going through so much right now, just trying to get back to full, safe in-person learning, trying to support those teachers who now are going to be waiting in line longer to get vaccinated, even though they really are frontline workers and possibly just as at risk as some of the other populations who have been given frontline status. And so if it continues to be a problem a year from now, you may find that there are more people who are willing to step up and listen. And in the meantime, one of the things that my communities did that I think will be very successful is they're creating a board within each school building of community members and faculty working together. That hopefully will give more input and more channels of collaboration between communities and school building administrators.
Eva.
Yes, I heard Howard Weiss Tissman being interviewed on Vermont Edition, presenting. It sounded to me like, a few people are resistant to this. A few towns are resistant, but it looks like people are generally happy. And it was a footprint, a step on the back of democracy when that happened. Was it not, Jody? Hey. And so I think we need to keep that in mind, that no matter how it appears to be working out, it is an issue about a democratic process that was a fist put on it, very much like the past administration. So I'm going to digress. I would ask the legislators, you three, if you bring up a proposal, whatever we call it, to really thank the young men and women who served in the Guard, who were down in Washington. I don't know if they're still there or not. I know Jill Biden made chocolate chip cookies, or she had somebody make them and took them to the troops. And I'd like to see us really, it's cold down there. And this is a big deal. And I think we need to honor them so that we keep them on track about what it is in a democratic process and what they did. So I hope that there'll be a proclamation honoring them. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Your points are well taken. Well, we're running a little bit over, but if there are any other questions before we go, I also want to remind people, feel free to get in touch with us at any time. Email is probably the best way. And if you're on here, it's because you got an email from one of us with the Zoom info. But we're glad to talk about these issues today or any other. And we plan to be doing this once a month as the session goes on. So I hope that we can continue to do the work and carry your voices to Montpelier. Now, Jody, is this a new hand you have up, or?
Yes, it is. I just wanted to thank Eva very much for her democracy comments, because that's exactly what happened in the state of Vermont. And as a longtime Vermonter, it was not the Vermont way. Thank you.
Yep. Certainly, your point is well taken. So if there are no other questions, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll second, Mike.
All righty. Well, thank you again. Thanks for the opportunity to serve you. I want to thank Sarah Copeland Hanzas for taking time out of her Saturday to come on down here. But like I said, please feel free. We'll stay in touch. And of course, stay healthy and stay warm.